The first thing I saw that morning was mud. Not rainwater, not a normal construction mess. Fresh, dark mud was piled across my front yard like someone had carved a wound around my house while I slept. A trench nearly 3 feet deep cut from the edge of my driveway, curved past my front steps, and disappeared along the side of my garage. My sprinkler lines were snapped. My landscape lights were ripped out. The grass my father helped me plant before he passed was shredded into strips. And standing on my porch, pounding on my door like I was the criminal, was Marilyn Brooks, the president of our HOA. Her face was red. Her hand gripped a stack of violation notices. "You had no right to interfere with emergency drainage work," she shouted. "You're being fined, and if you touch that trench, we'll add daily penalties." Behind her, two muddy contractors stood beside a pickup truck. One of them would not meet my eyes. I looked at the trench again. It was not in the common area. It was not on any drainage easement. It was on my deeded land, right beside my driveway and foundation. Marilyn pointed at me and said, "This is what happens when homeowners think they know more than the board." I should have yelled. Instead, I looked at the small black landscape light near my maple tree. Because it was not just a light. Neither was the birdhouse near the fence or the motion sensor under the eave. At 3:07 that morning, all three had recorded a contractor sneaking onto my property, a mini excavator tearing open my yard, and Marilyn's voice saying, "Just dig it. If he complains, we'll call it emergency work." So I looked her in the eye and said, "Before you say another word, you may want to ask yourself how much of last night you want the county to see. I bought that house 6 years after my father died. It was not a mansion. It was a one-story place with beige siding, a 2-car garage, a narrow porch, and a yard that needed work. But the first time I stood in that driveway with the keys in my hand, I felt settled. My father used to say a home was not just where you slept. It was where you fixed things before they broke, planted trees, and cared for every fence post, sprinkler head, and patch of grass because it belonged to you. When I moved in, the front yard was half weeds and hard dirt. I spent weekends digging out roots, repairing irrigation lines, and planting young maples along the driveway. By the time this happened, those trees had grown into a green line that shaded the concrete every afternoon. That was my peace. I was not looking for a fight with the HOA. I paid my dues. I answered their emails. When they complained about my trash bins, I built a screen. When they said my mulch was too faded, I replaced it. I did those things because I wanted quiet. Marilyn Brooks had been HOA president for almost 4 years, and everyone knew she treated the position like a throne. She used words like community standards and property values, but what she really liked was control. She fined an elderly widower over a rocking chair. She made a family remove a children's playhouse. She sent notices to a nurse because her lawn was cut on the wrong day. Most people grumbled, paid, and moved on. I did too, for a while. But one line I would never blur was my land. The deed, the plat map, the driveway, the trees, and the irrigation system did not belong to Marilyn, the board, or any contractor with a vague work order. If you have ever dealt with an HOA that slowly starts acting like your property is just an extension of their authority, comment your own experience below. Sometimes, the worst part is not one big violation. It is years of small ones that teach them you will keep backing up. In my case, the real trouble started with one harmless-looking email. The subject line said, "Community Drainage Improvement Notice." At the time, I had no idea that email was the first step towards someone cutting a trench through my yard in the middle of the night. 3 weeks before I found that trench, Marilyn sent an email to the neighborhood. The subject line sounded harmless, "Community Drainage Improvement Notice." It said the HOA had found minor drainage concerns after heavy rain and would inspect common areas near the rear walking path. There was no mention of my address, my driveway, or private lots. So I ignored it. 2 days later, Marilyn knocked on my door with Rick Palmer, the owner of Ridgeway Outdoor Solutions. Marilyn pointed toward the side of my yard. "We need to run a drainage cut through here," she said. "It will be quick." I asked, "Through my yard?" Rick smiled like he had already decided my permission did not matter. "It's not really your yard all the way to that tree line," he said. "Homeowners usually think they own more than they do." I told them I had my deed, plat map, and survey. That land was mine. If the HOA wanted to touch it, I needed written proof of an easement, a permit, and formal notice. Marilyn's face hardened. "This is emergency maintenance," she said. "The board has authority." I told her I did not consent to any digging, trenching, grading, tree removal, or equipment crossing my lawn. Rick looked at Marilyn and smirked. "People always get emotional about dirt," he said. While they stood there, I sent an email denying permission for any work on my property and copied the HOA management company. Marilyn never replied. Instead, the next afternoon, I received a violation notice accusing me of obstructing community maintenance. I thought that was their scare tactic. I was wrong. At 3:07 a.m., Rick's crew came back. They parked with the headlights off, unloaded a mini excavator, rolled it into my yard, and started cutting. By sunrise, they had carved a trench from my driveway, across the front lawn, and along my garage. They snapped sprinkler pipes, ripped landscape wiring, and damaged roots near one of my maples. Then Marilyn appeared at my door with violation papers, pretending I was the problem. She said the HOA had acted within its rights. She said if I touched the trench, they would fine me. But Rick barely spoke. He kept glancing at the landscape light near the maple tree, like some instinct told him something was wrong. He should have trusted that instinct, because the HOA thought they had done their dirty work in the dark. They did not know my yard had been watching them the entire time. I did not fill the trench. I did not touch the excavator tracks. I did not move the broken sprinkler pieces lying in the mud. From years of working with security systems, I knew the first mistake angry people make is cleaning up before they document. So I started with photos. I photographed the trench from the street, the porch, the driveway, and the side yard. I took close-ups of the broken irrigation lines, ripped landscape wiring, damaged maple roots, and tire marks leading from the curb onto my grass. Then I went inside and pulled up the cameras. The doorbell camera caught Marilyn arriving that morning, but the real evidence came from the devices she never noticed. The landscape light near the maple tree showed Rick's crew entering my yard at 3:07 a.m. The birdhouse camera caught the mini excavator crossing the grass. The motion sensor under the eave recorded Marilyn near my mailbox, watching the work. Then I heard her voice. "Just dig it," she said. "If he complains, we'll call it emergency work." I saved the original files, copied them to 2 hard drives, and uploaded a backup to cloud storage. Then, I printed every email, my refusal, the HOA notice, the drainage announcement, and the violation letter accusing me of obstruction. By noon, I was at the county records office. I requested my deed, the subdivision plat, the recorded easements, and the drainage map. The drainage easement was real. It just was not on my yard. It ran behind the common area, nearly 30 feet from where Rick had dug. That afternoon, I hired an independent surveyor. He marked the actual property line. The trench sat fully inside my land. Then I called code enforcement and asked whether any permit had been issued for drainage excavation at my address. No permit, no emergency authorization, no approved work order. That was when I stopped feeling shocked and started feeling focused, because this was no longer just a mistake. It was a trespass, a lie, and a paper trail waiting to collapse. The legal turn came from one sentence in my deed. The HOA had a recorded drainage easement in the subdivision, but it did not cross my lot. It did not touch my driveway. It did not reach my maple trees. It was behind the common area, on land the HOA actually controlled. Rick had not been a few inches off. He had dug in the wrong legal universe. My attorney placed the deed, survey, plat map, and camera transcript on her conference table. "No easement," she said. "No permit. Written refusal from you. Entry after midnight. Property damage." And audio of the HOA president telling them to do it anyway. That was when the situation shifted. Marilyn had been acting like this was a disagreement about grass, but the record said the land was mine. The county said there was no permit. The surveyor marked the trench inside my property, and my cameras showed they knew I had refused permission. My attorney sent a demand letter that afternoon. It went to Marilyn, the HOA board, the management company, Rick's business, and the HOA's insurance carrier. It demanded they preserve all emails, texts, contracts, invoices, meeting notes, work orders, and insurance communications related to the drainage project. It also demanded that the HOA cancel the violation notices, stop all fines, pay for restoration, cover a foundation inspection, repair the irrigation and lighting, and reimburse my legal costs. Marilyn tried one last move. She emailed the neighborhood and claimed a homeowner was delaying a public safety repair. That email became another exhibit. Because when someone damages your property, lies about their authority, and then tries to shame you in front of your neighbors, they are not defending the community anymore. They are building your case for you. Code enforcement arrived 2 days later. Not Maryland's contractor. Not someone from the HOA board. A real county inspector in a white truck, with a clipboard, a measuring wheel, and the kind of calm voice that makes angry people even angrier. Marilyn showed up 5 minutes after him. She stepped out of her car wearing sunglasses and carrying a folder like she was about to win an argument. Rick pulled in behind her, looking far less confident than he had on my porch. His boots were clean this time. The inspector asked for the permit first. Rick looked at Marilyn. Marilyn looked at Rick. Then, she said, this was emergency maintenance. The inspector did not argue. He just wrote something down. Then he asked for the emergency authorization, the approved drainage plan, and the recorded easement allowing work on my lot. No one handed him anything. My surveyor had already marked the property line with bright flags. The inspector walked the trench slowly, measured its distance from my driveway and foundation, photographed the broken irrigation lines, and compared everything to the county plat. Then he looked at Rick and said, "This excavation is on private property, outside the recorded easement, with no permit on file." That was the first time Marilyn stopped talking. A sheriff's deputy arrived next to take a report for trespass and property damage. I gave him the email, where I had denied permission. I gave him the violation notice. Then, I showed him the camera footage. When Marilyn's voice came through the speaker saying, "Just dig it. If he complains, we'll call it emergency work," nobody moved for a second. Rick stared at the ground. Marilyn said the recording was being taken out of context. The deputy asked, "What context makes that better?" By the end of that morning, the county issued a stop work notice and a violation to Rick's company. The HOA management company stopped answering Marilyn's calls and started emailing through their attorney. Their insurance carrier requested the full video, the survey, the damage photos, and the inspector's report. At the emergency HOA meeting that week, residents finally heard what had really happened. This was not a drainage repair. It was an unpermitted excavation on private land, ordered after the homeowner refused permission, then disguised as emergency work after they got caught. The room went quiet when my attorney played the audio. For once, Marilyn had no warning letter, no fine schedule, and no board language strong enough to cover the truth. The trench was now a county file, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The HOA stopped talking about fines after that meeting. 3 days later, their attorney sent a letter canceling every violation notice Marilyn had issued against me. The daily penalties disappeared. The accusation that I had obstructed community maintenance was withdrawn. The word emergency quietly vanished from every new email. Then came the repair bill. The HOA's insurance carrier paid for a licensed crew to fill the trench properly, compact the soil, restore the grading, replace the broken irrigation lines, reinstall the landscape lighting, and repair the damaged edge of my driveway. They also paid for a foundation inspection because the excavation had been too close to the house to ignore. Rick's company received a county violation for unpermitted excavation. Ridgeway Outdoor Solutions was removed from the HOA contractor list, and from what I heard later, Rick lost 2 other neighborhood contracts after the report became public record. Marilyn lasted 1 more month as HOA president. At the next board election, residents showed up who had never attended a meeting before. They asked about the legal bills. They asked why HOA money had been used for unauthorized work. They asked how many other maintenance projects had been approved without proper records. Marilyn tried to defend herself, but nobody was listening the way they used to. She lost her seat. The new board agreed to written project approvals, permit verification, and homeowner consent before any work near private property. It should have been common sense from the beginning, but sometimes common sense only arrives after an invoice. My yard eventually looked normal again. The grass grew back. The driveway was repaired. The maple tree survived. But I never looked at that landscape like the same way again. People think property lines are just marks on a map until someone powerful decides those marks do not matter. Then you learn how important a deed, a survey, a camera file, and one calm email can be. I did not win because I yelled louder than Marilyn. I won because I documented everything, checked the records, followed the law, and refused to let someone rename my land as common area just because it was convenient. If this story made you think of an HOA, neighbor, or contractor who crossed a line they thought no one could prove, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more stories where evidence speaks louder than intimidation.